Do you start creating your worlds by grabbing a piece of paper and start drawing a map? And then you get stuck somehow, wandering around aimlessly. Sounds familiar? Greetings guys, I'm Bhatty, and today I want to talk to you about how to create a world in 7 days, or rather 7 steps. We all know and love those maps from Tolkien, presumably. And most of us grab a piece of paper and start to draw a map. Or we imagine what life in the Middle Ages or fantasy worlds would be like. And so we need to define social structures and religious structures, but do not start with the everyday life of your fantasy world, of your science fiction world, or whatever. You will get stuck, I promise you that. Of course, there are hundreds of methods, and this is not a dogma. One of my favorite ones comes from Feng, great guy, great channel, Design Cinema, check it out. I put the link in the description below. But today I want to start at the beginning, at the very beginning. The method I'm using today has a very biblical approach, though it's not a religious topic today. Because in the beginning there is nothing, just the word, your word. What it means is that we as creators are creating in 7 days, or rather 7 steps, our world. Well, I'm using it with some modifications and alterations for the last 20 up to 30 years, I think. In the beginning I didn't even know I was applying it, because I used materials from the role-playing game era of the late 80s and early 90s. Well, a young man's follies, or teenagers, which I was in the early days as a storyteller when I shot movies with my Super 8 cameras as a teenager. Of course, I had been influenced by Star Wars and I wanted to do just that. Turns out you can't if you're in the 8th grade and you don't have the money you need to do a AAA production. Lesson learned. But in those days I learned the very first important lesson about how to create stories. Which is, I need characters, of course, I need the actions of the characters, and I need the story world. And this story world is connected to the tale and to the characters. It's not just wrapped around, you just don't place characters into an environment and it somehow works out. They correspond literally or metaphorically directly to what we are presenting. Have a close look at the scene from Star Wars Episode 6, where the Emperor sits in front of a window. This window is a web. It's a spider's web, and he is, metaphorically, the spider in the web. Or have a look at Alien, when they are entering the spaceship. Actually, they are stepping into the ship through a giant vagina. Alien is full with lots of metaphorically enhancing environments. It's a very, very sexual topic in Alien, if you have a close look. We want to create a narrative experience, and that is why we define our world, by building our world. To the characters, their actions, and thus the whole story can unfold in a much richer and denser way. I used this method with modifications in the early 2000s very successfully for the design of the world of the video game Sacred. So how do we create a world for our story, be it movie, game or novel, that our audience can believe in? And believability is the key here, not realism. We want the audience to believe what we are presenting them. So for this we need what Feng or Scott Robertson, great book, check it out, call grounded design, grounded in reality and then transformed, extrapolated. Now it's time that we use our divine powers to create our world. Day 1. Let's talk about gods and magic. Creation is a divine act, and we start in the emptiness and there's just our word. We create with our very words. So the first question you have to ask yourself, are there gods and is there magic or other divine or mythological creatures? Do you remember the black monolith from 2001? Well, here is a divine force pushing mankind to the next step. And we find different types of magic if you have a look at Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter or Conan. These tales are using very different types of magic. or check out the angels and demons in the TV show Supernatural. Have a look at the Greek and Roman pantheon. So ask yourself, is there really a Zeus in your setting? Define this and stick to it. It's very important. In Sacred we had the seraphim, the archangel-like creatures. But what most players didn't realize until they read all the texts and played all the quests was that the seraphim did not use real magic, but technology or techno-magic, which was quite popular in the early 2000s. And you can see hints of that in the last cinematic extra when the celestial fire destroys the last remnants of the undead. In my imagination and the world design, that was technology, which the last seraphim unknowingly used by performing rituals. But these rituals were activating those combat satellites. You find hints about the seraphim clones, which they are, all over the game. But it's hidden. They do not know anymore that they are clones. In my Kyle-Saga, there are demons. We know that after book 1. But are there gods? Or do people in this world just believe in them? Well, that's for the reader to find out. In Kyle I use the Shadow Elves with a different type of magic, and here the magic is more an elemental one. And if you have a look at the priestess from the beginning, she calls upon her goddess to grant her powers. And these powers are woven into the very fabric of the world. And the hints are there. For example, have a look at these tattoos of the elven priestess. Her body is covered with elemental tattoos, corresponding to the elements of the world. There are 4 parts now available in German, and the first English translation had some setbacks due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but I think we can expect the first part in late 2020. And I put the link in the description below to the website. Check it out and learn more about the world building I did there. Day 2. Physics. Don't fret. Just ask yourself, how does the physics system work in your world? For example, have a look at space travel in some sci-fi movies or TV series. The warp speed process in Star Trek differs greatly from the hyperspace concept in Star Wars. In an Alien or in Aliens, we have another concept of interstellar travel, but the rest of those worlds are our world. Have a look at Avatar. The flying rocks and the interstellar flight are the only exceptions to the physics systems we know. I did the same in Kyle, because I do not like much fancy flying and jumping around stuff, just because we can. I love grounded tales, very grounded tales. And so in Kyle you find a medieval world at the end of the Dark Ages, or at the beginning of the Renaissance, if you will. But the physics system is that of our world. End of story. Day 3. Weather and climate. Now let's go to our world. Let's define the whole bloody planet. Not just the country of your setting. Know what surrounds it. Know your world. You can define it in every way, just quick and dirty. It's okay. But you have to understand the weather and the climate of your world. Have a look at Star Wars. Tatooine is a desert planet. So we understand deserts. The same in Frank Herbert's Dune, though these deserts differ in the details. But you need to understand the world, not just the outlines on your map. And travel, well, when the pandemic is over, travel more. I myself use a lot of impressions from my own travels. And these impressions form my worlds, from the different locations in Europe, in the United States, or from the deserts of the United Arab Emirates to the Polar Circle, Greenland, Iceland, Spitzbergen. 1,000 kilometers from the North Pole. So, know your world. Day 4. Geography. Yeah, you see, I will take you through your whole school education. Now is the time you can start drawing your map. But when you're drawing your map, be careful. Understand what each outline means. Most people just draw a line to separate the land masses from the water. But have a look at this from the side. The water level defines what you see of the land. So you have to define the ground level of the water as well. And then you realize where islands are forming out of mountain tips. In 3D modeling, we often use height maps, which is a great concept of thinking for your world. Understand and define the geographical form of your planet, of your continents. Draw planetary maps or star maps and know how far away these stars are away from each other. Depends on the type of scenario you are developing, but you have to know the answer to the questions. You don't have to tell the readers or the audience, but you have to know. For Sacred, for example, I defined the world the player can experience based on the traditional geographical concepts we have in Europe. Mascarell in Sacred is inspired by northern Italy, very much like the Karamazine is in Kyle. And in Sacred and in Kyle, the farther you go south, the warmer the climate gets, meaning we are on the northern hemisphere of that said planet. Knowing this as a creator, I then could tell, for example, the level designers what I had in mind, and we could define each sector without breaking the believability too much according to the gameplay experience we wanted to achieve. For Kyle, for example, I defined the whole planet, all the continents, so I just named a few special regions I needed for the tale. But I know this world. I know every climate, I know every geographical formation, major formations, and I have room for other explorations here. Day 5. Now we are in your biology classes again. You know your climate, you know your geographical features, and now you can define what dwells there, what lives there. Do some research to create your biospheres. Read books. Where in your world do you have tigers or lions? Where gazelles and where deer, where bears? Or wyvern? Or all different types of snakes? For Kyle 1, I had the cobras Kyle sees at the bazaar imported from other regions, indicating that there is much more for him and the reader to discover in this world. We find the last remnants of an older world, the Nugaru lizards, who are now rare in the kingdom of Kolu, but still more frequent in the harsh lands of the Shadow Elves. Side note, the creatures in the novel do not have wings anymore. Day 6. Anthropology. Our world is now living with creatures. This is the time we place our intelligent or higher beings on our planet. Be it just people or elves or dwarves or orcs or Klingons or whatever. Imagine the orcs are living in a forest area. Well, what you see here is a concept I had in mind for the Sacred 1 add-on. The orcs, now forced to live in a forest, now use boars for riding. You see how you can create a logical world. Day 7. History and story. We have our world now, but still it is somehow static. Nothing has happened. Now we define its history. What happened before our story starts? How do nations or species treat each other? Were there wars? When was someone born, or when did he or she die? If it's an important person for your tale. How old is the prince of your kingdom, for example? Is he a 12-year-old teenager, or is he 60, or is he like Prince Charles? I had that very question when I was working on the Runes of Magic novel, and the style guide of the team did not answer my questions. Just define this until your story starts, and this is your very point of entry. Create a timeline, and then add in the minor events on country or nationwide level. Then you break it down, regions and cities, and you add in, for example, events like coronations, weddings, death. In Kyle Part 1, I placed the Maygraph Fest on May 1st, which was easy to remember for me. And out of this knowledge I created the encounter with Anya, Kyle's first love, and all the customs in the kingdom of Kolu. You see where I'm going with this. I use Excel and Google Sheets for all this. Why? Because I can easily calculate dates and numbers out of my entries. I use this for traveling, so I know how long a character wanders around in the world. And I also use this system for currencies, for example. So I know exactly what a sword or an armor costs, a horse, or everyday aspects like clothing or food or drink. I like to use Google Maps and Google Earth because it's easier to define a believable world and you can determine how long it takes someone to travel from A to B. Well, that's all I have for now. I'm curious about your comments. If you like what I'm doing, give me a thumbs up. If you'd like to learn more, please follow me on Instagram and Facebook. I appreciate your support for building my channel. Big thank you. Stay safe and healthy. Michael out.